Good morning, BookTube, YouTube. This is Johnny. It's been 3 or 4 days since I made a video, and my wife just left to take a lady from her church out for lunch, and I thought while she's gone I'd do a video. It's Friday Reads. It's a Friday. Call this Friday Reads. It's 10:41 in the morning here in Holland, Michigan. It is May the 16th, 2025. Still writing in my paper diary. I'm on page 427 for the year 2025. Yeah, I usually write around 1,200 pages a year. I find as I get older, I'm writing less and less because I'm just repeating myself. As you know, I keep an online diary, Crooked Fingers, and Live Journal, and I have 3 other online diaries that I paste what I write in Live Journal into those diaries. I just do it like I've mentioned over the years, that when I put down my occupation, you know, I'm not a skydiver, I'm not a jockey, I'm not a professional golf player. I am a writer, a diary writer, not a professional writer. I've never published anything. I've never written any kind of novel or theology book. I just write in my paper diary, in my online diary. I've been doing that since March of 2001. So Friday Reads. First of all, as you know, my reading is, you know, I have one day to live on this earth. I don't have tomorrow, and I don't have yesterday. I have today, and so today I read my Christian books in the morning. In the afternoon, I go into a lull around noon until 4 or 5. I read nonfiction, and then usually I read fiction in the evenings. You know, that's not a rule or a law set in stone, but that's generally what I do. And I've been primarily reading, since I last made a video, I've been reading The Life of Christ, the Viva Christa, Volume 1 by Ludolph of the Carthusian, translated by Victor Cucci. Yeah, I've been reading this. As you know, it's going through the life of Christ in the Synoptic Gospels. And I usually have my Bible in front of me. And today I haven't read today. Well, this morning my wife and we have devotions. We're going through the New Testament. We're still in the Acts of the Apostles, and at night we're still in the prophecy of Isaiah. But in the life of Christ, I read yesterday in the mornings, I read there in chapter 2 of Acts, his parents, chapter 2, verse 41, his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of Passover, and when he was 12 years old, Jesus, when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem according to the custom of the feast. When they had finished the days, they returned. The boy Jesus lingered behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother did not know it, but supposing him to have been in the company or in the caravan, they went a day's journey and sought him among the relatives and acquaintances. So when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem seeking him. Now, so it was that after 3 days they found Jesus, who was 12 years old, in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard Jesus, were astonished at his understanding and answers. So when they saw him, they were amazed, and his mother said to Jesus, "Son, why have you done this to us? Look, your father and I have sought you anxiously." And Jesus said to them, "Why did you seek me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" Now, verse 50, but they did not understand that the statement which he spoke to them. See, Jesus was already conscious that his Father was God, that he was the Son of God. Now, so that's what I read and meditated on yesterday morning in this volume, and that's on I'm on page 219, chapter 15. The next chapter is chapter 16, about when Jesus was from his 12th year of age until the 30th year of age. So I've been reading these primarily in the mornings. As you know, as I read through these, the life of Christ, I get out other commentaries on maybe the Gospel of Luke or the Gospel of Matthew or the Gospel of Mark, or I look at other books in my libraries, because you know I went to Bible college and I went to seminary, and I was trained to be a conservative, evangelical, Calvinistic, Presbyterian gospel minister, soul doctor, physician of souls. So I have a huge library, but I primarily been reading this and looking at the Gospels. And of course, we go through my wife and I were going through the Acts of the Apostles in the New Testament and the prophecy of Isaiah in the Old Testament. But I also my wife went to Grand Rapids this week, I think it was Tuesday, and I had her pick up a book for me when she went to Reformation Heritage Books. She picked up this book for me that I wanted, The Foundation of Joy, Assurance in the Theology of John Flavel by Jeff Stickland. Now, John Flavel was a Puritan, and I have his works. I've had him since I started reading John Flavel, I'd say 50 years ago. Yeah, we've lived here in Holland, Michigan for 34 years. I've been married this coming May 19th, 46 years. So I've been reading John Flavel for almost 50 years. And he lived from 1628 to 1691. And when I first started reading John Flavel, I had him in Baker Bookhouse, used to publish his treatises in paperback. And then the Banner of Truth Trust printed, this is a set, now they just reprinted the works of John Flavel, Banner of Truth Trust, but I bought my set in 1982. I bought my set of the works of Flavel. So when I got these out, because as you're going, this Jeff Stickland, he wrote his doctorate dissertation, Historical Theology, on assurance in the theology of John Flavel. And as you're reading this, it's like a dissertation. It has footnotes, and it's always referring to the writings of John Flavel throughout his works. And that's why I got these out and I put them in my main study, so I can, when I'm looking at a footnote, I can look it up in his works. And in the first volume is The Fountain of Life, which I read 50 years ago in paperback. The full title is The Fountain of Life, a display of Christ in his essential and mediatorial glory, That's what I first read in John Flavel. And I read it even before I left California to go to Bible college. I was reading John Flavel back in 70, probably start 75. I started reading John Flavel in paperbacks. I read in paperback his Fountain of Life. And then you have John Flavel, Volume 2. You have The Method of Grace, which was also in paperback. The Method of Grace and the Gospel Redemption, which I also read in paperback. And then you have Volume 3 of John Flavel, the Treatise on the Soul of Man, The Righteous Man's Refuge, the treatise, a practical treatise of fear, the cause and curse of mental errors and things like that. And then you have Volume 4 of John Flavel. There's 6 volumes. Different treatises. The one is most, I didn't read this, but this was also, Banner of Truth published this treatise by John Flavel in paperback, The Mystery of Providence. The Divine Conduct, or Mystery of Providence, has been published in paperback, but this is found in Volume 4 of Flavel's works. And then in Volume 5 of John Flavel's works, Navigation Spiritualized, Heavenly Use of Earthly Things, Adversity, a Furnace to Try Our Graces, and things like that. And then in the final volume, Volume 6, you have an exposition on the Westminster Assembly's Catechism and sacramental meditations, things like that. There's one thing I was going to mention. Another thing I had read. See if I can find it. Oh, I don't know if I can find it. I can't find it now, but there's one here about Christ knocking at the hearts of sinners. I can't find that now, but anyway. So yeah, I got John Flavel's works out, looking at him as I read through the foundation of joy, assurance in the theology of John Flavel. Yeah, you can buy John Flavel's works. They've been reprinted multiple times at the Banner of Truth Trust, and also you can buy them from Reformation Heritage Books. And also, I've still been reading The Writer's Lot, Culture and Revolution, 18th Century France by Robert Dalton. Still reading Free Speech, A History from Socrates to Social Media by Jacob Hangama, I can't pronounce the name. I did get a new book this week. I had pre-ordered it. Capitalism and Its Critics, A History from the Industrial Revolution to AI by John Cassidy. Yeah, I've been reading this as far as nonfiction in the afternoons. The weather's been really nice, so I go out in front and sit in the driveway in a lawn chair, and Holland is it's called the Tree City. There's trees and flowers everywhere, especially in the spring. So I sit in our driveway and watch people go by and walk on their dogs. We're running and watch the birds in the trees, and I read. And I've been reading Capitalism and Its Critics. Yeah, I just started reading this. Like, I've read about 55 pages. And still reading. Then I told you I was going to read Square Haunting, 5 Writers in London Between the Wars by Francesca Wade. So I'm reading that. And I was reading the chapter on Dorothy Sayers. And so I got out to read her first. My wife has all the novels of Dorothy Sayers in her library, and so I got out Dorothy Sayers' first novel she wrote, Whose Body. She wrote this in 1925, so I got it out to read it. So I've been reading this in the evenings. Dorothy Sayers, Whose Body, Lord Peter Wimsey Mystery. Yeah, my wife has all of her writings. My wife likes reading mysteries, and I don't primarily read mysteries, but I've been reading this last couple of nights. So yeah, I've been reading this nonfiction, Square Haunting, 5 Writers in London Between the Wars, Francesca Wade. Yeah, I read the chapter on the poet H.D., and now I'm reading a chapter on Dorothy Sayers. And then you have the chapter on Jane Ellen Harrison. Harrison was, if I remember, it says here, she was a classicist. And then you have Elaine Power, who was a economic historian. And then the last chapter is on Virginia Woolf. So, and I'm still reading, as far as fiction, Retrospective, a novel by Juan Gabriel Vasquez. I'm almost done with this. I have 100 pages left in this. And as far as nonfiction, I'm still reading Bright Circle, 5 Remarkable Women in the Age of Transcendentalism by Randall Fuller. So these are what I'm reading as nonfiction in the afternoons. The Bright Circle, Square Haunting by Francesca Wade. Nonfiction in the afternoon, Capitalism and Its Critics, A History from the Industrial Revolution to AI by John Cassidy. And then I also read for nonfiction, Free Speech, A History from Socrates to Social Media. Yeah, I'm halfway through this Free Speech, and then I've been reading The Writer's Lot, Culture and Revolution, 18th-Century France by Robert Dalton. So that's what I read as far as nonfiction in the afternoons. Fiction, Retrospective, a novel, Whose Body by Dorothy Sayers. Now, I'm going to quickly show you some thrift store books. I found this, I went to thrift stores this week. I found this, it's a historical, it's called Gabon's Shore, The Wreck of Grosever and the Strange Fate of Her Survivors by Stephen Taylor. I have another biography written by Stephen Taylor downstairs, but this is Narja, what you call it, Shipwreck. It just looked interesting. It's something different to read. Then I found poetry by Dylan Thomas, collected poems 1934 to 1952. I had a biography on Dylan Thomas, and I can't find it. And then I like reading literary criticism, and I found this at a thrift store. Literary Criticism, A Short History by William K. Wimstott Jr. and Kenneth Brooks. This is published in 1947. This is a reprint. I like reading literary criticism. There's a chapter here on poetic diction, Wordsworth and Coolidge. There's a chapter on different people, Samuel Johnson, just different aspects of literary criticism, short history. I found this volume of short stories by Lucy Warner. This came out in 1969. These are short stories, and the reason why I bought it, it's called Mirrors, is that the short stories take place in the East Village in 1960s. and about bohemianism and that whole kind of East Village, New York time period. She only wrote this, I looked her up, this Lucy Warner. This is the only thing she ever wrote, with these short stories back in '69. I had this already in my library. I wasn't sure. The Cold War, A New History by John Lewis Gaddis. I already had this, but I wasn't sure. I like reading on the Cold War, you know that. This is a novel by Lauren Groff. I have 3 novels by her, but I didn't have this one. She won the National Book Award for her novel Fates and Furies. This is her novel Matrix. And this is Writings on Religion by W.E.B. Du Bois. Du Bois on religion. He was a 20th century American. W.E.B. Du Bois shaped 20th century America to an extent rivaled by few others. The first African American to receive the PhD from Harvard in 1895. He helped create the discipline of sociology and was one of the founders of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I collect his writings, his biographies, W.E.B. Du Bois. This is a novel. I had this novel and I couldn't find it in my library. And I found another copy this week, The Woman Who Lost Her Soul by Bob I can't pronounce the name. Bob Shacochs. And then I found at Constantine and the Bishops, A Politics of Intolerance. This is on Constantine and ancient church history. During the time of Constantine, you have the Council of Nicaea. It's kind of like church history, ancient church history, by H.A. Drake. And then I found at a thrift store, Gateway Thrift Store, Freedom from Fear, American People and Depression and the War, 1929 to 1945 by David M. Kennedy. This is in the Oxford History of the United States series. As you know, I am a student of American history, American Christianity, literary history, pop culture, art, music, literature, as all kinds of things, America, freedom from fear. So that's what I found at thrift stores. Freedom from Fear by David M. Kennedy. Constantine and the Bishops by Drake. A novel, The Woman Who Lost Her Soul. Du Bois on Religion, edited by Phil Zuckerman. A novel by Laura Groff, Matrix. The Cold War, A New History by Gaddis. Short story collection by Lucy Warner, Mirrors, written in 1969, short stories. Literary criticism, A Short History. Collected poems, 1934-1952 by Dylan Thomas. Galabin's Shore, The Wreck of the Grosvenor and the Strange Fate of Its Survivors by Stephen Taylor. And that's what I found at thrift stores. So yeah, this morning I've been reading for what I want to read. I haven't got around to it. Volume 1, The Life of Christ. Reading The Foundation of Joy, Assurance, and the Theology of John Flavel. Yeah, I want to get back into reading the works of John Flavel. That's why I brought him up. I took down a set of Puritans I had in my library by Stephen Charnock, and I replaced them with John Flavel. So I want to read John Flavel as I'm reading this, The Foundation of Joy, Assurance, and the Theology of John Flavel by Jeff Stickland. So I got out his works. Can't go wrong reading John Flavel, the Puritans, English 17th century English Puritans. So it's going on 25 minutes. This video is usually shut down in 29 minutes. So that's my reading life. This is a Friday Reads, used books, John Flavel. Yeah, I never read Dorothy Sayers' Whose Body. My wife has read all of her works. So I'm reading it, and I'm getting 2 more novels used. I bought used from thrift stores by John. I can't pronounce it now. Anyway, Vasquez, I bought 2 more of his novels. Juan, Gabriel, Vasquez, Retrospective. And I'm really enjoying reading Capitalism and Its Critics, A History from the Industrial Revolution to AI by John Cassidy. Square Haunting by Friska Wade, really enjoying it. Also, I do have some kind of reservations about Bright Circle. I think he downplays the importance of Emerson and Thoreau and the Transcendentalist movement and other. He tends to kind of present the idea that it was these women that started the American Transcendentalist movement, that they are the founders and nobody else, and I don't agree with that. I think there were many causes and reasons about American Transcendentalism, and you can't just focus on 3 women saying that they were the founders of American Transcendentalism. I think that's kind of too generalized statement, but I do recommend the book, but with caution. Read good biographies on Ralph Waldo Emerson, read good biographies on Margaret Fuller, good biographies on Mary Moody Emerson, read good biographies on the Alcotts, Nathaniel Hawthorne, read Transcendentalist anthologies, because there were a lot of other influences about American Transcendentalism. Some were like Coolidge. There in England, the Romantic poets, all kinds of other things. So I wouldn't just focus on these 5 women, but look at all the other people around them. Look at what was going on even in the 18th century, in English Romanticism, German philosophy, other things. So it's more expansive when you study American Transcendentalism. Anyway, it's just my random thoughts. But I do recommend The Bright Circle, but with reservation. Read it with discernment. Read other things. There are books just focusing on American Transcendentalism, just looking at it. And I could show those. I think I've made videos in the past about that. I gotta close. So once again, I do pray you have a good reading weekend, a new week. We're in the middle of the month. We're in the springtime, and I got to close. May the Lord bless. Until next time, bye.